I think most of us are comfortable with a certain amount in our bank. And so, oh, thank goodness, I'm not overdrawn today. It's a good day. Oh, I have $500 in my bank. I'm good. And what I've discovered is when a client comes in and they tell me, I just inherited $500,000. And the money goes in their bank and they're like, I need to pay off this debt. And then I need to do this. I need to get the money right out of my bank account as soon as I can. And I'll say, let's just let the money sit there for 30 days. Just go in and look at the money for 30 days. What? I'm like, well, you already owed the money. So 30 days isn't going to hurt you. Why don't you just sit and go in and go, hey, money, how are you? And talk to your money. And people are like, what? You want me to leave money in my bank account? That's too much money, right? And so we have a comfort level because I might make the wrong choice. I might not save it properly. I might not invest it properly. Let me just get rid of it. And then I won't make a bad decision.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Life Inner Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life Inner Show, we help people make more, work less, and live awesome, amazing, abundant, incredible lives. I am joined by the one, the only Polish Peter. What's up, dude?
Hey, man. So I'm excited about this episode because hopefully, finally, after this episode, you're going to learn how to be funny and make money. Funny and money.
Money is funny. Yeah,
money.
Right. So we are talking with Bob Wheeler, who's the CFO of the Comedy Store. Now, this is the Comedy Store, the world famous one that all these famous comedians have gone through, and he's kind of holding the fort down and making sure things run smoothly financially. But here's the cool thing. We're talking about the mindset, the emotion, the way you view and think of money and how this applies to your life and how this impacts like every part of your financial picture and even your life as a whole.
Right. And whether you're going to be successful, you're going to grow that bank account or you're going to shrink it, or what your mindset is, and what does that look like to be, multimillionaire? What do they think about? How do they think about those kind of things? And so that's what we're going to be discussing on this particular episode. And I want you guys to take some notes because you're going to start to see what your relationship with money is.
Absolutely. Let's dive in right now, man. It's a great interview. Bob Wheeler. Bob, what's up, man? Welcome to the Life Inner Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Dude, this is going to be awesome. I'm super excited. So for those of you who don't know Bob, and we just started talking before we recorded the episode, Bob, you're CFO of, and now is the official title the world famous Comedy Store, or is it the Comedy Store?
It's the Comedy Store. Everybody
but
just calls it the
famous.
world famous. It is world famous.
It is.
It's world famous.
Awesome. So for any of you guys who have had any interaction, involvement, viewership, or participation, anything comedy, like this is the store that everybody goes through. This is the place where people perform. Like you were mentioning some of the names. Who are some of the people that have come through the Comedy Store?
Oh, well, let's see. George Carlin, Robin Williams, Roseanne Barr, Jim Carrey, Jay Leno, David Letterman, Sarah Silverman. I don't know if you know any of these names. Chappelle.
Yeah. All of them.
Polish Peter.
Yeah. Peter had a job like cleaning the bathrooms, maybe.
Oh, there you go.
That's what it was. Yeah.
That's cool.
And so this is awesome, man. And so what I find interesting here is like, so your perspective and the Comedy Store is something that, has such it has such a reputation in any documentary about comedy. You always hear the Comedy Store being mentioned.
Yep.
And you handle things from the financial side of things. You're CFO of the Comedy Store, and you also have a really, really cool angle and perspective on money. And you talk a lot about emotions as they pertain to money and shame as it pertains to money and how these things influence our financial picture. Did that perspective evolve from your position in the Comedy Store? How did this start for you? How did this particular niche take shape?
Yeah. Well, it's a combination, and the Comedy Store does play into it. I have a CPA practice. I have about 1,000 clients. I work with small businesses, and I would give people advice, and then they'd go out and do the exact opposite. And I'm like, what's going on here?
That's the comedy, right?
Right. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I gave you some good advice. And so I realized, wow, people are operating from an unconscious story, as was I. Right. And I was actually telling people what to do and then not following my own advice as well. So I was like, wow, isn't that interesting? Let's explore this. Got to get curious. And what happened was also at the time, and the way I got into being the CFO at the Comedy Store, I was a comic, and I was doing comedy, and Mitzi called me up and she's like, Bob, I heard you're a CPA and you got to come help us. I was like, no, Mitzi, I'm a comic. And she's
I
like,
want to be on stage.
I want my stage time. I'll pay you in stage time, and I was like, so what happened was they were at a place where they had about $100,000 worth of payroll debt and payroll taxes. And the IRS was like, we're going to close the doors. There were some dark days at the Comedy Store. And basically all my friends were performing. I was performing. I thought, well, I'll do it for a little bit. Yeah. 25, 30 years later. Here I am. But, one of the things that I discovered, though, I was sitting in the main room at the Comedy Store, and a friend of mine came up and they said, I'm so embarrassed. I was just visiting my family. Brother's a doctor. My sister's a doctor. My other sister's married to a doctor. I'm a comic. What a loser. I'm the stupidest person in the world for choosing my passion and creativity. What's wrong with me? And I was like, you're not the only one. She's like, what? I'm like, there's so many people out there, and people are presenting, and people are making choices to please other people, and you're choosing what you love. And there's nothing wrong with that. And everybody doesn't have, it's not all greener on the other side. And it was so surprising. And I thought, people need to be reminded of this. It seems so obvious, but we have to keep reminding people. The pictures you see in social media, it's a snapshot. You don't know what's going on underneath. It's the iceberg. You see the tip. If we don't start talking about all that's not seen and we're making assumptions, we're all operating on false information.
Mm-hmm. And so talk to me about that a little bit, because and especially as you're talking about finances, what is your, and what do you think that balance is for people that are like, hey, I could do this thing over here where I'm going to potentially make a whole lot more money, or I can pursue my passion, and maybe one in a million of those people make it wealthy and famous, and then other people kind of just get by. Do you have any thoughts or advice for people that are struggling with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it's important to follow your passion.
Okay.
Whatever that is, move towards it. And be realistic. If you want to be a teacher, no, you're not going to make millions of dollars. So invest wisely, save smartly. It doesn't mean that you have to have a life of poverty or that you have to have a life of not enough. Know what you're going into. Know the rules. If you want to be a writer, if you want to be an actor, know that the odds are not stacked in your favor. But if you're passionate about acting and you want to bring that to the world, or bring your comedy to the world, bring it. And no, you might want to have some other pockets of financial security to help carry you along. I mean, I actually have to credit the Comedy Store a little bit with my accounting practice being so successful, because I knew they didn't have the money to pay me what I should be getting paid. So I had to have a really successful accounting practice so that I had extra funds so that I could put in the time and energy to the store, because that was my passion. And so it's just about making smart choices or different choices so that they serve us, and then we can go out and show up in the world the way we want to, but without having to worry so much about where's my next meal coming from.
Well, and I imagine especially it's really interesting, and you are extremely well qualified for this to answer this question, because at the Comedy Store, it's comedians almost are like musicians, like you mentioned, authors, one in 50,000, make it, or whatever that number is. And so you probably witnessed this a lot of people who went through that and who are going through it consistently. And if they're passionate about it and they have set up these other parts of their life to allow them to do that, that it seems like it would be a really good thing for them to be able to continue. Talk to me about how emotions get tied into money and where those come from. You mentioned, we were talking earlier, you mentioned, how our emotions influence our decisions as it pertains to money that may hurt us and prevent us from doing some of the things we want to do.
Well, it starts early, right? It's a mindset that starts when we're little. 3 and 4, you're selfish, you're too much, you're not enough. You're so special. You can do anything you want. We all get these different messages. I want a toy. You're greedy. I want a toy. You deserve it. It's all landing in different ways. And so we get socialized, for myself, like you got to be your accomplishments, you got to do everything. And then when you get that accomplishment, you got to do three more. And then when you do that, like you never get to stop. And so at an early age, we're like, am I selfish? Am I greedy? Am I compassionate? And everybody else is telling us what we are. And then we're watching and going, well, they get away with that, or they get in trouble for that. And we start making a story. And so by the time we're going to kindergarten and we're on the free lunch program, or we're the rich kid that gets dropped off, or we're the kid on the bus, we start making judgments about our peers, and they start making judgments about us. And so by the time we're graduating high school or college, we've already said, oh, I can't get what I want, or I can go for the world. And we have these stories. And so for me, what I've really started to come to believe is everybody has a story, and your story has a cost. And so we need to find out what the story is so that we can decide if it's a story we like or if we need to change the story.
Well, I find it interesting too that you've come to this conclusion, because typically, like as a CPA, most CPAs are focused on, okay, well, your cost of goods is too high over here, or your ratios are off, or your margin needs adjustment. You're like, no, let's come back a whole nother level and talk about the psychology and the emotions behind that. And so what are some of the things that people can do to discover what their story is? And like, how do they, recognizing, I guess is maybe step one, but number two is like, what do I do about this? Like, how, if I can work on my business metrics all day long, but if I still have this issue up here, like I'm going to struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first part is obviously getting to know your story. Start writing down things you remember your parents said, didn't say. If you grew up in a certain culture, if you grew up in a certain religious organization that had a certain view on money, how did that impact you? Was it blessings? Was it shameful? And then just really start. What did my grandparents say? What did the friends around me? What did they say? Start getting really familiar with, oh, that's right. Money was bad. Money never talk about. Those kinds of things. And again, it's all just information, right? When we do this, it's with a curiosity. Wow, that's so interesting that I took on this view. And so once we start to know that, and then start to listen to our words. So I've got a lot of successful clients this year when I told them how much money they owed, and they're like, this is the worst year ever. I don't have any money. Where did it? And I'm like, wait a minute, let's stop for a second. Let's check the facts. Oh yeah, I've got $500,000 in the bank. Oh yeah, we generated $2 million in rent. Oh, it's been a pretty good year. But the story is, it's horrible. And so we want to start to listen to what are we saying so that we can then start to say, okay, is that true? And then, of course, I have to bring in my accounting and do a cost benefit analysis. What's the cost of staying small? What's the cost of the self-sabotage? And what's the benefit? If I stay small, I don't have to fail. If I stay small, I don't have to tell people no. If I stay small, I don't have to try to bring everybody with me. Whatever those things are. And then ask myself, is this serving me? Because if it's not, and for some people it is, and that's fantastic. And for some people, it's serving them in a way that's maybe not the best, but it feels good for them and they don't want to get out of their comfort zone. So there's no judgment here in that there's a right or wrong way to do it. It's just, if you want more out of life, if it's not enough for you, then ask yourself, am I willing to be uncomfortable? Am I willing to do some work? And am I willing to invite it in?
And are these the kinds of things you help people with at your workshops and through your practice? Okay.
Yeah. We do a lot of experiential stuff so that people can actually, my first book was The Money Nerve, and it's because we carry our trauma and our emotions in our bodies. When you win a lottery ticket, you're like, whoa, or you get a bonus that you weren't expecting. You just euphorically feel it. When you bounce a check or somebody declines your credit card, your chest sinks in, you get a pit in your stomach. It's all very physical.
And it's so interesting to me because money seems to be one of those things that has almost more of I can't think of almost anything that has such a weight in our life. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just such a thing that people have not only such different views on, but it has such a tangible effect. Like, and so people focus on it, whether, hey, I'm going to, whether it's protecting money or making money or saving money, or like all of these things seem so huge.
Well, it impacts every single aspect of our life. It tells me what kind of house I'm going to live in, or if I'm going to live on the streets. It tells me if I'm going to wear nice clothes. It tells me if I'm going to bring my lunch or not have lunch. It tells me if I'm going to cover everybody else's lunch. It tells me what kind of car I'm going to drive, if I'm going to buy a car. It tells me if I'm going to travel. There's like every decision we make comes back to almost always, what's the financial cost? Can I afford it? What will people think of me?
So I got a question for you, because I totally relate to what you're saying here, because I remember when I was first going through what you're basically talking about, I discovered that for me personally, the money conversation that I had was money equals fighting, money equals problems, money equals, because that's why I grew up when I was little, right?
Yeah.
So I then played through my life. Like, curious for question I have for you is how you view money. What is your view of money? How you look at it?
Yeah, money is an energy for me. Money is a neutral energy, and money amplifies our goodness. It amplifies our badness. Like it's just a reflection of who we are. It's not that if I have more money, I'm a better person. It's just that I'm a person that has more money. And so for me, it's just understanding that there's a ebb and flow. You know, there was a point where scarcity, I got to hold on my money. I got to hold it. Well, money has to flow. If I want money to come in, I also have to let money go out. You know, when I first had my CPA practice, you know, clients would come to me and I would get their money and I would be in relationship with them and I do great work. But then, I need a plumber. Well, I don't want to ask my client because I don't want to give my money back, right? There was this little mindset of like, I got to hold it. Then I realized, wait a minute, I'm in a relationship with these people. Yeah, you know how to do this? Great. Let me engage you for that. You know how to do that? Let me engage you for that. Letting my money flow back out, because if I'm just going to hold it tight, it's going to stagnate.
Does that include money flowing out to IRS?
As little as possible within the law.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because there's so many diverse perspectives on money. Like you mentioned, someone like, someone might think like I have a lot of money and that makes me more successful and I'm a better person and I'm superior to you. Somebody else might have a lot of money and they feel guilty about it. Like,
that's right.
I don't deserve it, or they feel uncomfortable with it. And so how does, like, this really seems like it almost stems back to like, we have a lot of people who are parents that listen to our show as well. They're business. We have a lot of I'd say, we have a lot of business owners that are audience and a lot of people that probably have families as well. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, like, what are some of the, like, how does somebody who's a parent not screw up their kids? Like what are some of the things they can do to kind of convey this right or helpful sense and perspective of money versus like doing damage?
Well, I think it's important to start talking with your kids, and it doesn't have to be, hey kids, I've got 400,000 in the investment account. What should I put it in? Or, hey, we can't pay the mortgage this month. We're going to be on the streets, right? We don't want to overwhelm kids. But what we can do is when a kid, and I share this story because for me, it was like so traumatizing, I'm sure, for the kid. I was in a toy store and it was January, February, and a kid apparently had asked for a toy and she's like, that's it, you selfish kid. I'm telling Santa Claus, you're getting nothing. Well, for a 5-6-year-old kid, January, February means he's got to wait 800 years until Santa Claus is going to bring more toys, right? And he's begging, Mom, please don't. What she could have said was, son, I don't have the money right now, or I do have the money right now, but that's something that you're going to have to save for, or that's something you're going to have to earn for. And there was an opportunity to have a conversation with him, not to shame him, not to tell him he gets whatever he wants every time he asks for it, but to have an honest conversation of, we don't always get what we want, or sometimes we have to make sacrifices. And those are the kinds of conversations we can have, with a kid. I like this. I have this thing where I tell people, take a glass jar and put the money in the jar so the kids can see the money. And then when they want to go buy a toy or when they want something, they have to bring that jar with them. And maybe mom pays half and kid pays half or whatever it is. And I know a lot of other people that have started to do that, where the kids have to bring the piggy bank with them. And a friend of mine was telling me their kid was like, yeah, I guess I'm not going to have that. I don't have my piggy bank today. Oh, well. Right. And so to just start to not make it good or bad, but just, well, here's how it is, and share enough with the kids to let them participate in some of the family decisions. When they're in their teens, let them buy their clothes for school, give them a budget, and you can buy 3 shirts, you can buy 1 pair of shoes, whatever, but that's going to get you through December.
Yeah.
And let them make bad choices when it doesn't matter so much, so that later on, when there's bigger choices, they've learned how to navigate those decisions.
That's something that, like, so my oldest daughter right now is 22. And this has been something that we've been working on since she was a kid, is like helping her understand not only the value of money, what things cost, but also, like, for instance, like, hey, here's some things that I'm going to help you with as a parent, but here's where your investment is going to be. So, your car, you're paying half of it. Your cell phone bill, I covered it, I think, till she was like, 18. And then it's like, you're paying the $20 a month. And all of this is to try to, and, but for instance, like I've also shared with her some details of my investing in like stocks, and just trying to, and given her like the opportunity to have like a fake stock portfolio.
Right.
And I think it's about, and try not to screw it up too. Cause like, as a parent, you don't know if you're doing the right thing or not, but like,
sure.
but you're trying to get that, produce somebody that, cause like, I didn't have any of this when I was a kid. Like I wasn't taught anything about money. And so I learned the hard way. And so I think trying to give them those experiences and get the buy-in, help them understand that the importance of this. Talk to us about, like, I feel like we've talked somewhat about like having money and generating money, and having a good mindset around that and an emotional perspective. But what about like things like debt? Like, how does that emotion or the emotion around debt kind of play into how we manage our money?
Well, I know a lot of people will say, I'll never get out of debt.
Yeah.
So why bother?
I said that.
Like, it's just going to keep me in there. I have clients that'll say, I've got $100,000 worth of debt, but I'll just make the minimum payments, and, I'll just die with the debt. What are they going to do? That's, for me, I'm like, no, I don't. So there is good debt. There's bad debt. I think that it's about the mindset. And it didn't take us 5 minutes to get into debt. It's not going to take us 5 minutes to get out of debt.
Yeah.
And so we have to really make a choice of, do I want to find solutions to the debt? And am I really willing to make the sacrifices to get there? Because some people aren't. You could take a second job. You could spend less. You could move into a smaller place. You could not buy the fancy car. You could. So the question is, do I want to? And so do I want to just stay with my story? I think with debt, there are ways that, like, if I'm buying rental property, or if I'm getting into a house where I can get a tax break and things like that, it makes sense to have that kind of debt. But again, if I'm going into some of these people that went into debt when the houses were sky high and interest rates, everything was crazy, right? And then the market crashes, and they've got variable rates. Variable rates kill you. And so I'm old enough to remember when I was in junior high school, when interest rates were like 18%. And people I could hear my parents' friends going, oh my God, my mortgage just tripled. And so being smart about even that kind of debt, you want to be smart, because you don't know when things are going to change. I've had so many clients say, yeah, I'll refinance next year. Well, you don't know what next year is going to bring. And so you have to be smart about debt. It's not bad. But I only have debit cards in my wallet, which I just discovered the other day is a bad thing, because DMV only takes credit cards and they wouldn't take my debit card, just because I don't want to be able to create debt.
Yeah.
I just want to be mindful.
Man, well, you said something there I think is interesting, because like, even if let's consider, like, you have investment property, for instance, and you might still, and we see this within life in here too, is like somebody on paper could have something that makes sense financially and logically, and hey, I'm getting a positive cash on cash return, or I have positive cash flow every month. But I've also seen some people, getting back to your how you think about money, your emotion about money. I've seen some people feel like, you know what, I'm still uncomfortable with this, because even though I know it makes sense, logically makes sense, mathematically makes sense, I'm still uncomfortable with it. And so I wonder, like, how at the end of the day, I'm wondering if it all comes back to what you're saying. Like, It's the emotion you
Emotional.
feel about it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, if you can catch yourself going, oh, I'm going into that story, or I'm going into a spin out, what's going on for me? I've had a few mortgages and I've bought a few properties. And the thing is, even now, still, when I go through the process and I've got the down payment and I've got the credit score, I'm like, oh my God, they're looking at my credit. What if it doesn't go through? I don't know why I think, but it's just that mindset from the past because my parents didn't have a lot of money. Things were like hit or miss. And so even though all the facts support that it's going to go through, I get really like, oh my God, it's what happens. I'm going to feel so terrible when they say no. And they're like, great, Bob, everything's fine. What? Oh, and then I feel this sigh of relief. It has nothing to do with the facts.
Right.
And I just have to tell myself, oh, you're just going to go through this for 3 weeks. Just remember on the other side, it's all going to be good. And this is just a story that's going on in your head that you have to keep going. Yeah, go away. I hear you. Old story.
Yep.
So I have a question for you because we talked about the story on this podcast quite often. I believe that a lot of it is us living the story. And then at one point you mentioned about you got to change the story.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice, all and good. Change your story, change your life. And listen, I mean, I believe in that. But some people, when they come to me, it's like, well, how do I change it? Like, can you change the story? I mean, it's hard to change and all that kind of limiting beliefs around it. So what's your take on that about changing the story, how you do that, and is it possible and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I definitely think you can change your story, and I definitely think it's hard. It's not easy. The first thing is when you go into a story that's not serving you, is to be able to say, oh, there's that story again. I still will go into a house and go, is there 6 months worth of food? Right? Like, oh my God. Just for those times when it got really tight. And I was like, okay, thank God I have 25 cans of tuna. So that's the first thing. You've got to have that awareness of here it is. It's coming back in. It's trying to reinforce itself so that we can catch it and go, yeah, that's a story. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not still feeling the impact, right? But that's a story. I know it's a story. And so I have to keep reminding myself that's a story. I was talking to my therapist the other day and I'm like, I'm going into the story. I know it's a story at this point. That's a good thing because in the past I thought it was the truth. So I think it's so important to just keep, oh yeah, I'm in story. How is this serving me? What's the benefit I'm getting out of this story? Right. What's it costing me? Do I want to keep paying that cost? Do I want to keep paying for that? And so it doesn't happen overnight. Now, sometimes, things do change. I will still be the person that takes 6 months to make a decision. Thank goodness I have a business partner. It's just like, she'll just push me. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was good. Right. Cause I can't always see, beyond myself. So finding other people to support you, finding people to reflect back to you, finding people to remind you the truth of the situation. And just for me, it's being willing to be vulnerable to say, man, this stuff scares me. This is the part of the story where I always like to self-sabotage and have other people around me going, Bob, you got this. Like you've been doing this, you've got this. And here's the fact. Oh, right. Okay. Let me just breathe. And so many of us forget to breathe. I forget to breathe all the time. Like get back in our bodies and then go, that's a story. Now I still have things. I still get angry with the IRS and I get triggered. So, okay, and then it doesn't work out well with the IRS agent. So what I do, I have staff. I'm like, you call the IRS because you're not emotionally attached to this. Right. And then they call and they get the results I need because I'm too emotionally involved in the conversation. That just didn't go well.
Man, this makes so much sense. And as you're talking, Bob, I'm like, all these things are coming through my head in this kind of like cloud of the topic of money comes up. And I start to think as well as like, wow, like how much does that story also impact what we do with the money? Like some people like, should I spend this on this thing? Should I indulge myself over here? Should I invest it? Should I give it away? Like talk about how emotion can influence what we actually do with it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I guess it's a sense of security to have it in a bank account, but at some point, like there's probably other purposes for it.
Well, it's interesting. So I have a belief, and I've found this to be pretty true. You can check in with yourselves. You don't have to say it out loud, but I think most of us are comfortable with a certain amount in our bank.
Yeah.
And so, oh, thank goodness, I'm not overdrawn today. It's a good day. Oh, I have $500 in my bank. I'm good. And what I've discovered is when a client comes in and they tell me, I just inherited $500,000. And the money goes in their bank and they're like, I need to pay off this debt. And then I need to do this. I need to get the money right out of my bank account as soon as I can. And I'll say, let's just let the money sit there for 30 days. Just go in and look at the money for 30 days. What? I'm like, well, you already owed the money. So 30 days isn't going to hurt you. Why don't you just sit and go in and go, hey, money, how are you? And talk to your money. And people are like, what? You want me to leave money in my bank account? That's too much money, right? And so we have a comfort level. And same with lottery winners. We got to get rid of it so we can get back to comfort. Because I might make the wrong choice. I might not save it properly. I might not invest it properly. Let me just get rid of it. And then I won't make a bad decision. I think we do make decisions emotionally about whether or not we save it, whether, oh, I'll just spend it on this and I'll do this. And I don't want to have anything real tangible. So people judge me. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, if I do this, people are going to go like, well, he's really wealthy. He has to pay for everything. I didn't want to have a nice car for a while. I didn't want to pay the extra tip when I was like going through valet, right? Because I was frugal. And I'm like, I don't want to, now that I'm driving this car, they're wanting $5 instead of $2, I'm like, ugh. So I'll keep the Corolla,
right?
Right?
Yeah.
To save $3.
Dude, I think that's so true. That is so true. Like I remember, so I had a lot of credit card debt at one point in my life, almost $90,000. It was the most ridiculous, stupidest, insane thing I ever did, and I will never go back to that
You
again.
didn't spend it on hair, did you?
Yeah, it was all hair. It was all hair regrowth products. It did not work clearly. But I remember so I was so used to every month I'd make money and then literally the next day it would be out. It would be gone. And I was just so used to having no money in the bank account. Yeah. And then once I got out of debt and I started kind of actually, I'd put money in the bank and then it would still be there. Like a couple of days later, I'm like, oh, I'd freak out. I'm like, something's hold on. What am I forgetting to pay? I'm so uncomfortable with this. And I'd almost find ways to spend the money because I was so used to being broke. And it took a long time for me to recondition that. So what you're saying, I think is totally true.
Yeah. And I know for myself, I couldn't advocate for myself at a certain point, but I could advocate for other things. So my business was something that wasn't me. And so when I set up my business, created a corporation and put all the money in the corporation, well, I had to keep that money there because I had to pay employees and I had to do things, right? And it was a lot easier to be protective of that. But my own bank account, I'm like, okay, let me get comfortable with, 1,000. It took a while. Now, of course, 1,000, I'm like, I've only got it. I've raised the bar. Thank God. Thank you. Blessings. But, but being able to protect my business gave me something to protect. Because for me, that's selfish if I'm trying to protect myself, because I had a mindset of don't be selfish, don't be greedy. And so, but protecting my business, that wasn't about me. That was about my clients. That was about my employees. And so that's how I was able to start to build up, some wealth it's in the business.
A little workaround really right there. Yeah. You figured out the shortcut there.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I've seen the other thing happen where so in the company, I came in as a student actually in 2009, and my coach, I heard him say this once, his name's Steve, and he's saying, at one point in my life, I would have been grateful to have $1,000 in the bank. And he's like, once I had 1,000, then I'm like, oh, if I just had 5,000 in the bank. And, of course, after 5, it's 10, 25, 50. And he said the number kept going up, but at some point, he didn't feel any more secure as when he had 1,000 or so. That was interesting as well. That always stuck with me, because it's wow, how interesting that you can get to a point where, you have 6 figures in the bank and the same sense of not enough is there too. That's an interesting emotional occurrence as well. Do you have any explanation for that or thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know the statistics, but they've done studies on happiness and money, and they've found that exponentially, the more you make, you don't get any happier, right? At a certain point, because there is so much of this, I got to have more. And it's partly we're socialized that way. I think, I know for me, I was my accomplishments, right? So I've got to have money in the bank. I've got to have amazing stories. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And then as soon as you do it, it's just like comedy. You got to find your next audience, right? Because that was yesterday. And so I never got to stop and go, wow, this is pretty cool. Look how far I've come. When you're running a marathon, you don't stop at mile 24 and go, wow, I've done 24. No, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. Right. And then you get there and you're exhausted. And then you're like, oh, when's the next race? And so I think most of us, myself included, or maybe it's just me, don't take enough time to stop and say, man, this life is good, man. I'm breathing. I still have choice. I have all kinds of possibilities that can happen today. As long as I'm breathing, as long as I can get up, I have opportunity to have a different outcome. And so I just don't think we pause enough and celebrate. I was taught to be successful, do these things, but I was never taught stop and receive and appreciate what you've done. Well, that would be selfish. That would be crazy to think that, take in my goodness, what? I want to have impact on the world. How dare you? Those are things that I was like, oh, I have to keep that a secret. I want to be a good person. I want to be in community. I want to have an impact, but I don't want anybody to know because they'll judge me. Right,
man. Wow. That's really powerful. Talk to us about the book, Money Nerve. Tell us, give us some a distilled version of what you cover in there and why people should pick that up.
Yeah, well, so it's a great book for couples. It's a great book for anybody, but it's a great book to partner with somebody because there's a lot of calls to action at the end of each chapter. And so I'll go through, we talk about your story, talk about your history, and then there's calls to action. Talk about the different emotions. We talk a lot about fear because fear holds a lot of people back, and fear keeps people from taking promotions or going for certain things. And so looking at all those different mindsets and how even if we're debilitated by fear and we're paralyzed by fear, that's still a decision, right? Even when we don't make a decision. And so to start to really look at all that, I go into honest budgeting, and I like to call it honest budgeting because I have a lot of people that like to put stuff on the budget. So if anybody sees it, it looks good. And I actually, when I talk to people in workshops and stuff, I'll say, look, if you have a shopping addiction, if you have a gambling habit, you need to line item that in. And not because I want to judge it, because I got to account for the fact that you're going to spend $500 at the horse races. Right. Yeah. And so, and just being really clear. And with budgeting, most people round up their income and round down their expenses. You got to do it the other way. You're not taking home your gross pay. You're taking home your net pay. So you're not working off $1,000. You're working off of $700. And so if we can start to get real honest about that stuff, and then I go through how to set up goals, how to make dreams become reality, because we've got to set a timetable. We've got to financially map it out. And so steps on how to do that. So you can go, oh, that's doable. Because I can go to a workshop and say, who wants to be a millionaire? I do. When do you want to be it? Tomorrow. All right. Probably not going to happen, but let's map something out so we can get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I'm imagining that the book talks about, because you even mentioned the word budget, and some people get emotionally like they feel like it's I'm depriving myself, or I have to, I'm like, they have emotional ties just to the word.
Yeah. So change the word, planning strategy. You don't have to use the word budgeting. Find something that works for you. I'm an accounting nerd, so of course I get excited about budgets and balanced numbers and reconciliations, and everybody else is like, track the numbers. But whatever word you use, that information is useful. It helps you make choice, because unless you've got $1 billion at your disposal on a daily basis, even people with millions of dollars still have to make choices of how to allocate that money. And I think there's a false belief. And I know with my dad, I was trying to explain to him, oh, you're a millionaire, you're a millionaire. That doesn't mean I have $1 million disposable cash on a daily basis. I may have a couple $1 million worth of assets, but they're not liquid. And I wouldn't have them if I spent like I had $1 million every day.
Yeah.
It would be gone. And so I think we have to, ground back into the reality is you can get to that $1 million, but it doesn't mean you're going to have $1 million at your disposal on a daily basis.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because do you think that in order to accumulate more and more money, let's say you're a millionaire, you have $1 million, and again, whether it's asset based or you have some cash in the bank, whatever, how much different of an emotional, I don't want to, I guess there's no word for emotional mindset, but like, I'm just trying to think of like, what kind of set of emotions you need to have to go from 1 million to a 10 million or 100 million. Is it the same thing, just amplified, or do you need a completely different emotional makeup for that to happen?
I think, and I call it money mindset. And for me, it's really about a mindset, whether it's $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. If you believe that it's possible, if you believe that it's allowed to come to you, if you're allowed to receive it, if you believe all those things, and then you are willing to do the hard work, right? It's not enough to just believe it.
Yeah.
You got to show up, right? You got to actually then do the work. And, and I think some people think, well, if I just believe it, I want a Mercedes under my pillow. You still got to go to work. You still got to show up. You still got to participate and be proactive in your abundance. It's not just going to come to you for the most part. There might be some lucky person now that I can't say unequivocally nobody's ever. Yeah, it might. But the reality is we have to proactively participate in bringing in that wealth and being comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's interesting too, because like, I've wondered about this and I've had this question from people in the past, like, so for instance, we do these workshops, we help people identify like what they want their life to look like. And that can include, what they do, what they have, what they experience, things like that. And sometimes we'll have people come to us and they're like, I can't tell if, it'd be cool to have a Lamborghini, but then I kind of start to think like, well, I really wouldn't want to drive it anywhere because I would bottom it out and it would get scratched and the shopping cart would crash into it. But then again, I don't know if I'm just saying that because I'm self-sabotaging myself to make me feel better about not having a Lamborghini. And so it's like, it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, it is. And I think the question to ask yourself is, if $2 million, $5 million just popped in my life tomorrow, would I go out and buy a new car? Would I upgrade the house? Would I have a consumer mindset? Would I be like, what can I buy? What can I buy? Or is it going to be, oh man, how can I serve community? How can I invest this? What are some smart choices in terms of property or stocks? How much can I give back? That's the mindset from my perspective that's going to take you all the way. Because if you're not thinking about community, if you're not thinking about service, if you're not thinking about how I can put away money for the future, that doesn't mean I have to deprive myself. But if that's my mindset, I'm going to go much further than, oh, now I can buy this. Oh, now I can buy this. Oh, yeah, it's all going to be gone because you're just burning through cash. And if you have a burn through cash mentality, you're going to keep burning through cash.
Man,
whether you have $100 or you have $5 million.
Yeah, that is a really good question to ask yourself, man. That's awesome. That's super revealing too. Bob, how do people learn more about what you do, how to find you, like in the book?
Absolutely. themoneynerve.com. That's nerve, NERVE, not nerd. I'm the nerd, but it's the money nerve. We've got access to my CPA practice, the book. There's an online course. There's a lot of free tools because we like free tools because not everybody has the money to pay for things. So go in and use the free tools. And I've got workshops. I do speaking events. And really, I'm just out there trying to spread the word that money is not a bad thing. We don't have to fight when it comes to having a money conversation with partners, spouses, kids, and that most of us didn't get the download. It's okay. And it's never too late to get started. So.
Man, that's awesome, Bob. You're awesome. I love the mission you're on and the things you're doing with people. It's gonna make a tangible difference in everyone's life who embraces this. Thanks for being on the Life Inner Show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Man, I enjoyed that conversation because it's like your emotions around money have such a pivotal role. Like, you can. And quite frankly, they influence everything because if certain activities in your business are going to make you a lot of money, but you have a self-sabotaging mindset around money, you're not going to do those things, right? You're not going to, or if you're viewing like, oh, I don't want people to think of me this way, or I think of myself, as, I'm a middle-class person, I'm a blue-collar worker, you're never going to allow yourself to become, what you could be.
Yeah, I mean, remember the exercise that we do at the 3-day Gear Life giveaways when we talk about the money, when we have him pull out the dollar. Right?
Yeah, what do you see? Yeah.
Well, you see, and it's interesting to see how people react and how they view it and what they look at it when they get really vulnerable with that conversation, because it becomes that. I mentioned on this podcast, like my money conversation was money equals problems, money equals fighting.
Mo money, mo
if that's
problems.
the case, right? Would you want that in your life?
I know,
No.
right? Well, I like that he said I look at money as like a neutral energy, and it has to flow, and I love that perspective. One of my favorite things he said is right towards the end, where he said, like, if you want to know like what kind of perspective you have, ask yourself, what would I do if I just woke up like tomorrow and I had a couple $1 million in my bank account? Would I spend it? Would I invest it? Would I use it to serve the community? Like, that's a great question, because I think that's super revealing with that. And it's probably a great indicator. Like, are you likely to accumulate money, and is it going to serve you, or could you potentially serve it? Depending on how you steward it, like what you do with it, and I also found it interesting, like, I think this is one of the things us as parents like have a real responsibility to kind of to set ourselves up to succeed, to set our kids up, to succeed with this, like, and give them a healthy perspective of money, one that doesn't like disempower them.
Yeah, I totally believe that, man. And this is one of those things that we have to talk and be open and ask questions. Like, hey, ask them the question, like, what do you think when you think about money? What do you think about, right? What pops into your head kind of stuff, right? Because I think that is an important aspect. One of the things that popped into my head as we were talking is I do this with my students because we have a ton of money conversations. I ask them this. So it's consider for a minute that money is a person. It's a person, and tell me about your relationship with that particular person, whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whoever it might be, but that's a person, that money. What's your relationship with that? And talk to me about that. So if you're listening, try that on and see what that relationship with that person called money is like for you. Does it leave you? Does it stay? Does it argue with you? Does it, what does that happen? How you look at it? Do you argue with it?
Do you respect it?
Look at it with a 10-foot pole. Do you respect it? Right.
Yeah. Is it loyal? Right.
Is it loyal? Right. And,
and
those kinds of things. And many times I hear people talk about, well, listen, the money never stays. It always leaves me.
Yeah.
It's never around, especially when I need it.
Right. Well, and to that point, man, I really enjoyed him talking about, the story that we have. First thing is like recognizing it's a story. Mm-hmm. And with that, one of the things one of the things he mentioned as well is like, I love that the suggestion he gave that person who's like, hey, or the theoretical example, like, hey, you just inherited $500,000. Let it sit there, right?
Yep.
Become and kind of acclimate yourself to having money. And so maybe just letting that money sit there so you can see it, so that eventually, like at first it's gonna feel really weird and you want to spend it. And by the way, that was me, man. Like when I was so used to having no money, I was like looking for ways to get rid of it. Like I was like, oh, I was uncomfortable having money. And so that's a great suggestion. Like almost like, inoculate yourself against those money things that are holding you back. So say like, for instance, you're used to having no money in the bank account. Well, let some things sit there. Like, instead of, and I'm not saying don't pay your bills, but like, let's say your bill is due in a month, maybe like let it sit there for, 29 days before that bill is due, before you pay it. Like, and maybe start to pay yourself first instead of, like all these little things that can kind of like just chip away at that story one small piece at a time, once you've identified which pieces of it are not serving you.
Yeah, that's why in that, whole relationship with the money starts to reveal a lot of those things, because think about it this way, in that relationship, do I put myself first in that relationship, or am I the last? Right. And then do I pay myself first? Do I have I had some students, I have them set up different accounts, whether it's envelopes or whatever, where the money has a designation, right? Because I love that he brought up the fact that money is flowing. It always has to move. Think about it this way. Money cannot stay in the same place. If that's the case, money has to flow. So where does it flow? How does it flow into my life? How does it flow into my life?
Yep.
How do I attract it? Am I the type of a person that relationship wants to be and hang out with me and be with me and all that kind of stuff? Or think about it, if this was a person, am I the type of a person that this person wants to hang out with? Or am I the type of a person that the person wants to like nothing to do with me?
Yeah, like
So if that's the
if you're-
case,
dude, if your money's a person, you'll be like, you're just gonna spend me on something stupid,
right?
like, no, I don't want to be spent on on pack of gum.
Right. And money, think about it this way. Money, I think, has to grow, and also money has to flow and it has to grow.
What do you know?
Exactly. Now we're rhyming, man. Listen, I gotta write this down. Money has to flow and it has to grow. Man, look, I'm rhyming.
Yeah,
now.
write that
Holy
down.
cow.
You're gonna forget it.
Yes.
So, yeah, I see. Yeah. Well, and so, dude, that's so true. And I think I love what you said first about like, and this reminds me of like Mike Michalowicz, multi-time guest on the Life Inner Show, wrote Profit First, and he said, take advantage of human nature, take advantage of your emotions, and have different accounts and put money in different places to serve you. And so there's a lot of overlap there, man. That's a great suggestion as well.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all how you feel about it, right? It's like the story and the emotions. It all comes down to how you feel about it, which influences, how you think about it, what you do with it. And it becomes, like we talk about this a lot, like a self-fulfilling cycle. And so they're all related. And I think if you can master your emotions around money, like you'll be much more successful.
Right on.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Bob. It was a great conversation. We would love for you to leave us a review, leave us a rating, give us a thumbs up, give us 5 stars, tell somebody about us, because our mission is to impact lives and share the Life Inner message of abundance and of wealth, of freedom with everyone we can. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We will see you next week, everyone. Take care.